G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for today's look at our best 23 going into round one. I'm Damo, and today what we're going to be doing is discussing everything we know from the preseason so far as I go around the field placing the best players for our 23. So you can probably treat this video as a bit of an interactive preseason update. I've specifically chosen this week to list my best 23 before any of the scratch matches come out, just because I'm keen to shape this squad before we start seeing everyone play. For me personally, it's going to be a little bit of a way to test how the feedback we hear all summer does translate to on-field performance, because there probably will be some shifts once we start to see who performs in proper games before the preseason is finished and the games are all done. But before I pull up the team builder, I'd like to just put a little request out to anybody watching this video that isn't already a subscriber to please consider hitting that subscribe button. I'll be posting reviews of all the preseason matches that I have access to. By memory, that means that there is usually a West Coast Interclub that they stream online. That's not a promise, but usually you get the notification maybe 24 hours in advance that there's a link. And hopefully if that's available, then I'll be providing a review of that, as well as the West Coast Fremantle scratch match and then that official preseason match against Port Adelaide. And once the season starts, I'll also be covering both the AFL and Waffle matches throughout the season. For anyone who's new to this channel, that's what I was doing last year, which I found was a pretty popular one because it gives guys an insight into who's coming in or who's likely to come in every Thursday based on their Waffle performance and what to expect from them. So by hitting that button, you'll never miss any of that content once we get rolling through the season. But anyway, now let's pull up the team list and have a look at what we know about everyone selected and what they've been doing this summer. All right, so I'm not sure what you guys all use when you're building your teams. I'm sure a few people have done it, but I've got the Zero Hanger, which was the same one I used last year. Their user interface is a little bit neater this year. And I'm just going to go through each line and have a chat. I was going to select the players one by one, but what I found is I've actually probably changed this team 3 or 4 times over the last couple of weeks. Just a few guys that I just don't like leaving out and then bring in. So there's definitely going to be keen to hear some comments from everybody about who they would have liked to see and who they probably would have replaced, because it's very hard to move the guys that I've put in this side. Right off the bat, I think the guy that's my dark horse is just down here at half forward, Harry Schoenberg, that I think should be debuting in round one, and I'll give the reasons for that one when I get to it. But let's just start at the top of the list, which is the fullback line. And Brady Hoff, so just the update on him is that he had a minor injury that was 4 weeks. That's due to come up for renewal at least a week out from round one. And in my experience with Brady Hoff, he hasn't had any major injuries, but when he has been out, he's never struggled to hit the ground running and perform immediately back in. So he doesn't really need that run up that I may say about other guys. The other one at fullback, Harry Edwards, what we know is that he's had a pretty clean run this summer. I think he had a minor surgery just going into Christmas that he recovered from and has built himself back up into. And then across the other back pocket is Brandon Starcevich. So these are the guys that clearly have been on the injury list at some point over summer. He had a knee injury as well that we had some concern would be an issue. But again, a bit like Brady Hoff, he looks like he's going to be ready about a week out from round one of the season, which means that, given his composure and the brains that he brings to the field alongside his athleticism, I don't expect that he's a guy that will need that run up. If it was one of the earlier younger guys that's, still trying to find their feet in the AFL, sometimes those injury setbacks and the conditioning that they lose is enough that they just need time in the waffle to build up. But these three, I'm pretty confident will be starting across this line as long as there's no further injuries or setbacks on what they've had. Now, the halfback line could be a little controversial because I'll just mention off the bat, Josh Lindsay is in, and I think a lot of guys are pretty keen on him. But when I did the entire team over and over, it does mean that Liam Duggan, the captain, is out. Does that mean that I'm going to be right about this? Probably not. I expect that Liam Duggan will be in that round one squad, but I just can't figure out who he pushes. And this isn't an attack on Duggan. It's more of a compliment to the guys that are in the side that I have put ahead of him. So Josh Lindsay, I've got on the field just given his performance over summer has been spoken pretty highly of, which means that his readiness is really good, because I think I said in my December reviews on players that have been drafted that he would secure a spot in the side once he's, I suppose, AFL fit and conditioned. And that may not be in round one, but from what I'm hearing, he's looking pretty good on the track, and his skills and I think his smarts are going to be up to it as long as his body is, which from all accounts it is. Centre halfback, Tyler Young. I think this is a no-brainer. He's been a walk-in starter at Richmond when he's not injured. He's been brought across the club, I think, pretty much, as the second in charge behind Harry Edwards when it comes to key defence. So I don't think he's going to have any trouble unless he comes in and has some really bad performances, which I also highly doubt. Other halfback line is the guy who should have been inside the Origin this was it next weekend is Jimby. Probably, I reckon he deserved a spot inside the All Australian team just about after last year, and I think he's going to prove that this year. He's been pretty clean run the whole way through, and just somehow manages to look a little bit bigger every season. The explosive growth has stopped. I don't think he can get much bigger than where he's at, but guys are still talking about his work in the gym. So Ruben Jinby, walk-in starter at halfback. Now moving to the midfield. This will be interesting to talk about. So Willem Dersma I've got on one wing. He has been training there. I think that's a pretty easy placement. Devon Robertson I'm putting as the starting centre mid at bounce. Now I'm going to cover immediately Elliot Yeo being on the interchange. Obviously, the dream team that most guys would know at this point is probably more likely to be Reid, McCarthy, and Yeo. I've got Yeo on the interchange because I'm treating Yeo a little bit like managed minutes. I may not be every single game this season, but I do think that he's the elite X factor that we're not going to just grind 95 minutes out of every single week like we may do with other players. So he's on the interchange for that reason alone, but I do think there will be some magic when he's in the middle with Reid and McCarthy and other guys as well. So my starter is Dev Robinson. I've been really impressed with what I've seen from him over preseason. He's an absolute bull. And that term gets used for guys that win the contested ball, but he actually plays like a bull. If you look at any of the clips that have come out of preseason, he literally puts his head down and just charges through guys. I don't know if anyone remember that game, British Bulldogs, or I suppose it's almost rugby-like, but he obviously doesn't move like a rugby player. And I think that he's going to be just perfect in the mix with those really elite distributors like Reid and McCarthy alongside him. On the other wing, I've got Bo Allen. Now, you'll notice if I scroll down that I have Hamish Davis also in the squad, but on the interchange bench. I think it's neither here nor there who's starting at that first bounce, but I think those two are going to be pretty interchangeable there, especially since Bo Allen plays off halfback as well. So if you look at who I've got on the interchange, you'll notice that there's not a huge amount of depth in the back line on the bench, but there is that room for guys to shuffle around from other parts of the ground, like Bo Allen, obviously. And then if you're talking about, key defenders falling off, scrolling back up here, I believe the insurance against Harry Edwards or Tyler Young going down is actually Ruben Jinby, who can play way taller than his actual height. Moving to the ruck, so the Rovers line, as we used to call it, I've got Matthew Flynn. Now, he's in there despite me saying that I think this year is going to be very favourable for the likes of Cooper Duff-Tytler and Bailey Williams, purely because Bailey Williams has been injured. And while I have seen injuries that have been right to the borderline going into round one, even if he is, I think he's one of the guys that needs more of a run-up. So I think Matt Flynn's pretty comfortable at the moment for a round one spot in the ruck. And then we've got Harley Reid, who I'm pretty sure everyone who's been following the summer with West Coast would know is looking in absolutely insanely good shape. Even listening to him talk, he's no longer talking about how he's training just to, get his hands on the ball. He's talking about like the ideal weight. That Ben Cousins stuff where he's mixing and matching where his weight is to get the right amount of minutes of running from the midfield around. He's also put on a lot of muscle as well. So I think you're going to see, and this is not coming from me, I think everyone's expecting this. This is going to be a pretty impressive year from Harley Reid if nothing else goes wrong. And I think we're all pretty excited for that. The other guy, funnily enough, that I think is almost equally as exciting is Tom McCarthy. Now, for the season that he had last year, you'd think that he didn't have much more improvement to make, but this is where the track watch is really starting to impact what I've got on the team and what I want to discuss. He's apparently the star of the West Coast Eagles over summer. We know that he came in and for all the amazing stuff that he did from that mid-year draft that he got into the side from till the end of the year was basically on VFL training and commitment. Those guys don't get paid enough to put in the commitment that these AFL players do. So this is his first AFL preseason, and it sounds like he's used every minute of that time as a full-time, reasonably well-paid and well-supported athlete to go to the next level and then probably the next level after that. So I think what you're looking at here when you look at Harley Reid and Tom McCarthy is there's potential for both of those guys to get decent looking individual Brownlow votes by the end of the year. Am I saying that either of them are going to be a Brownlow medalist? No, but I am saying that after maybe 3 seasons of West Coast collectively polling, I think under 25 votes in every one of the last 3 years, these guys are they'll be posting numbers close to the top end of the teens at least. So that's my prediction. Just Tom McCarthy's fitness, conditioning, his explosive running that he's been working on has all been geared up all season for him to work in the midfield. I also did a little bit of time on the treadmill the other day, rewatching the West Coast Adelaide game, and he was at the centre clearances there. The ability, the IQ, he slows time coming out of those centre clearances. So everything's there for him to have the year that I'm pretty much pumping up right now. And I think it's going to be a very exciting midfield with guys like Devon Robertson, Jack Graham doing a lot of the heavy lifting for them. And then Elliot Yeo interchanging as well with his pretty much the same star power that those guys have got to explode forward with the ball. So that's going to be pretty exciting. Moving to the half forward line. So I think the dark horse, and I did mention this in December, that if he could apply himself to a standard that I think maybe he's failed to for a couple of years at Adelaide, that Harry Schoenberg would break the team early and probably surprise people. And I've just started to hear whispers that guys are seeing him deliver on that at training. There's been little clips of him, that sort of head down line breaking style that he's got just from, match simulation come out in the West Coast social media. But more importantly, a few guys have actually said that they're quite surprised by him. So I've got Harry Schoenberg at half forward. Apparently the intention is that he's been trained up in the forward line and in the midfield, and that he could be one of the pinch hitters that rotate through that midfield. But I mean, if you look at the squad that I've got here, there's a lot of guys like that. In fact, opposite half forward flank is Elijah Hewitt, who also is that guy. But yes, Harry Schoenberg I've got in the side, and I'm picking him to be the guy that surprises us with some impressive displays. I don't know that I'm going to predict big numbers when it comes to possessions, especially if they're playing him mostly off half forward, but I am predicting him to be impressive with the role that he's given. Centre half forward is the up-and-coming star of 2025, Jobe Shanahan, in his second year. I think that's close to a no-brainer now, which is pretty cool considering we had some pretty decent, consistent performers in Jack Williams and even Archer Reid, who I have popped in the forward line as well. But I do think that Jobe Shanahan and Jake Waterman are the two walk-in starters for the key forwards. And then from there, for me personally, I've got the third tall in the forward line, which I think is reasonable, especially when you consider Archer Reid's probably the best insurance for pinch hitting in the ruck and also filling in the ruck if anything goes wrong. As I mentioned, we've got Elijah Hewitt on the other half-forward flank, who has had a calf complaint recently, and from his most recent training notes, he's not participating in match simulation. However, we are still a month out from round one, and West Coast have, I think, repeatedly put out there that complaint is the word, as opposed to any kind of significant injury. And the fact that he's rebuilding already from, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, does show that they're not really protecting that load too much. So I expect he will be ready for round one. And unlike some of the guys scrolling up that I mentioned in that first row, Hoff and Starcevic, Hewitt is one of the guys that does need some more run-up, but I do think the run-up's going to be there. Possibly, I think something close to a fortnight out, he should be ready to completely load up leading into the season, and we should hopefully also see him play at the least against Port Adelaide, but possibly against Fremantle, but we can all double-check that as each week goes by. In the full forward line, I've got Archer Reid, like I mentioned, as that third tall. Not only do I think he's been getting some pretty decent feedback in his second preseason, but also he is the insurance against any injuries or any kind of longevity issues with Matt Flynn over the course of a game. He's not a primary ruck like Bailey Williams, so he would be doing his role really as a key forward and pinch hitting, but at 203 centimetres, it also does mean that we can fall back on him if we need to do a little bit more. Jake Waterman at full forward is, I think, just a pretty much guaranteed walk-in. All the reports coming out is that he's still in, I don't want to say career best form, but he's pretty much been in career best form for, say, the last 3 years now, and he hasn't dropped a gear from what I'm hearing. So he should be ready to walk in after his injury last year, keeping him out for most of the season. Forward pocket, I've got Liam Baker, who you can pretty much stick anywhere on the field aside from in the ruck, although I think he'd probably give it a shot if he was given the opportunity. And I have heard that he's playing up forward. We're certainly loaded for those halfback roles in the side this year, so he's pretty versatile. I don't think he's going to stay glued to the forward pocket all game, but I do think that forward pocket or forward flank more or less is where we're going to see him start. The interchange, like I mentioned earlier, Elliot Yeo's on that bench, not because he isn't part of the dream team, but because I think it's just a reflection of the overall 4 quarters that he's going to be exposed to. I do remember a couple of years back, they were trialling him not being a full-time midfielder from halfback, and I don't think that's going to be the case now. I think that he is going to play in the midfield, but they're just going to try not to overuse him. There was one Geelong game a couple of years ago where we were getting destroyed, and eventually we conceded and caved and put him in at the centre bounces, and he started taking just about every centre clearances until he did his adductor. So I think, yeah, the proof is that's where he belongs, just not overdoing it. Other one, Tim Kelly, like I mentioned in my video in December, I see no reason that he's not going to be maintaining or improving on the form that he showed in the last quarter of 2025 going into this year. He is a superstar of the competition that's had some form issues over the last year and then maybe a little bit of a drop even the year before that. But I think that we've got every need for him to be out there, and that's why he's in the 23. Hamish Davies, like I mentioned, you could probably swap him for Bo Allen or Willem Dersma at any point. And like I said, those two guys have got a lot of versatility to go around the ground. He's put on a lot of muscle. Just for anyone who's not been following that track watch, his fitness is elite like it was last year, but it's gone up even more. He's one of the fittest guys in the side, and his tackling, like I mentioned, I watched that Adelaide game just this week. His tackling technique is as good as anyone I've seen. And he's going to be doing that with a lot more fitness and strength base going into this year. So I reckon I've been I probably slept on Hamish Davis last year more than any other player when it came to underrating him. And this year I'm going to acknowledge that I think he belongs in the 23 and he will be very consistent for us from there. Jack Graham, again, you're looking at another guy who's got that Devon Robertson role, but also can play. I mean, he's played off half forward for Richmond and us, and he could even go as far as playing on the wing or even halfback if we needed. I doubt that he's going to be in the back line, though. And then Old Faithful, Jamie Cripps. And I'm going to just click on him just at the end as well, so you can see who's been left out. So now that brings up the entire list of guys that haven't been selected, I'm going to acknowledge a couple of guys like when I say Archer Reed, I think that's a very close tie with Cooper Duff-Tytler. He's hit the ground running earlier than I think people predicted. I know I said in my videos that the ability to be a superstar of the competition's there, but the role that he plays, you usually expect guys like him to take a little bit longer. Apparently not. Apparently he's already right on the cusp. So you could probably say, I'd imagine that it's Archer Reed that he's wrestling for a spot with just because of that hybrid key forward ruck role that they both take. I don't think he's wrestling for Matt Flynn's role at the moment. I just think that would be too reckless of the West Coast Eagles just to dump a first-year player into the middle of the ground full-time, and I know they won't do that. Who else? There's, like I mentioned, Liam Duggan. I think he's going to get a spot in that round one side. Question is, who on my list goes out? My gut tells me if there's a minor injury, that's probably going to be the difference, but it's possible that he could nudge Josh Lindsay based on what GPS numbers Lindsay's posting that we're not aware of. I've just heard that Lindsay's looking like he's really taken well to the preseason, and given his ability and how much we need a distributor like him, I just would imagine he's the guy that we're going to walk in as soon as possible for the sake of winning games. Other guys that I think are pretty close to the line is Sandy Brock. He's apparently performing really well, and I thought he was really good last year. I don't think Tyler Brockman's looking like he's going to be in the mix, unfortunately. I think there's going to be some findings that come out there that aren't too favourable, and I'm not going to go further into it. Tom Cole, again, looking at the list of guys I have selected, I don't know who he's bumping, but I do know that he is very close to being on that 23 as well, so we'll just see if I get that one wrong. Scrolling down, Tom Gross has had some really great feedback. I think he's going to absolutely destroy teams in the waffle. But remember, the waffle starts 3 weeks later than the AFL, so we'll see what it takes for him to push his way into the side, but I do think that's what it will take. Scrolling down, Hutchinson's one of the guys that's long-term injured. And then Ryan Marich, I think he's got his work cut out for him being someone I think that they've looked at putting on the wing, and we're pretty good for wing options. I mean, as you can see, I bumped Hamish Davies onto the bench in favour of Bo Allen, who, by the way, had a really good write-up in the last West Coast training report just on what he was capable of doing. I always say he's a line breaker, so if he's line breaking from the win, then that's a win for us, having Campbell Chesser really show what he was capable of last year before he left. And then just scrolling right to the bottom, like I said, Bailey Williams is probably going to have to compete for his spot, having lost some of the run-up that he would have had because of his injury. And Jack Williams, a little bit like Cooper Duff-Tytler and Archer Reed, is pretty much in a competition for one spot in the side. You can't have too many of them, but easily AFL capable. Next week, I do intend to do a waffle side. So looking at this just at a glance now, if we don't have a huge amount of injuries, it's going to be very exciting if the waffle side can start with at least, I'd say 80% of the names that I'm just showing right here going into the waffle game. Obviously, you can go 2 weeks without injuries, and if you pick up a few in that third week, the waffle side does take a hit. It's what's happened the last couple of years, but I still think it's going to be a very exciting year to be covering the waffle. Which brings me to the end of my best 23, just a month out from round one, like I said. I've tried to put a bit of focus on who's competing for spots in this 23 that missed, and maybe which guys that did get selected sit in that back six of our best 23. You know, those 17 through the 23rd guy that tends to change quite often from week to week. I'd be really keen to hear a bit of feedback in the comment section on this video of not just who you'd have in that I missed, but why. As well as if anyone thinks the squad I put together could potentially maybe leave different parts of the ground vulnerable, or even just aspects to the game, you know, the modern game that could be affected by the squad balance. What I mean is like little things, like do we have the right combination of defensive runners paired up in the middle of the ground, or the right guys to trap the ball in forward 50 alongside each other once it goes in there, to go along with obviously the need to score goals. Those are the things that I really love to see. And honestly, looking at the side as I put it together, I'm curious if anyone else believes that, like me, I think we're probably the most underrated team going into 2026. If you don't agree with that, I'd be keen to know who you think is the most underrated side. There's potential, I think, for our midfield to gel as an A-grade combination. And I think that's mainly based on the unexpected rise of Tom McCarthy to sit alongside the star power of Elliot Yeo if he can stay fit, and Harley Reid, who's looking very likely to have the year that everyone's been excited to see him have. And then all the depth that we have alongside those guys in that role with your Dev Robertson, Jack Grahams, but also some of the Schoenberg and even Finn McRae's that we've brought in to make sure that we're never lacking in pure mids to step in if we need to. So let me know your thoughts, and otherwise I'll see you guys again next week as a minimum for the Origin game, and possibly even some waffle best 23s as well. Cheers until then.